Hello everybody, this is Gareth Cahoon Speaks back here with another live video on YouTube and TikTok. I'd just like to invite you to join on my YouTube and TikTok accounts by just typing in Gareth Cahoon Speaks or look me up on my website, which is www.garethcahoon.co.uk. But for YouTube and TikTok, could you hit the subscribe bar and hit the notification bell to be notified when I post my next post, or otherwise you can give me a thumbs up if you like the video. This one's about Israel news and what's going on over there at the minute. Speaker Johnson to All Israel News: threat of war with China is real, very dangerous time. We must be prayerful as Trump tries heroically to de-escalate tensions over Taiwan and trade. Amid coalition calls for annexation, settlement movements march to border demand return to Gaza. Joining the UK and France, Canada announces it intends to recognise a Palestinian state in September. This won't do good for any nation that stands against Israel, will be cursed. The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced Wednesday that Canada intends to recognise a Palestinian state, aligning with a growing international government critical of Israel's conduct in the war in Gaza. Canada intends to recognise the state of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. Carney said in a statement to reporters alongside Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand. Carney linked the decision to the situation in Gaza, saying the level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable. Yes, did you notice but that he didn't mention the suffering in Israel? This move also comes after France attempted to persuade a large body of countries to recognise the Palestinian state. During the UN conference on the peace settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution in New York on Tuesday. Let me know what you think of a Palestinian state being made alongside Israel. Rare first-century coin declaring for the redemption of Zion discovered in Jerusalem. You see, these things prove that Israel has a right to the land. An ancient coin from the tail end of the Second Temple era has been discovered just as Israel prepares to commemorate the destruction of the temple on Tisha B'Av. Saturday night is the beginning of Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Jewish month of Av, known as the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. It marks the date on which both temples were destroyed, the first burned by Babylonians in 586 BC, and the second by the Roman Empire in 70 AD. Israel mourns, yet the yearning for redemption endures. Now the discovery of a coin carrying message of the hope for the redemption has been unveiled, dated to the year just before the destruction took place at the hands of the Romans. In ancient Hebrew script, one side of the coin proclaiming the stirring words for the redemption of Zion, a rallying cry for the Jews of Jerusalem under Roman oppression. It was found near the southwest corner of the Temple Mount in the Jerusalem Archaeological Garden. The bronze coin minted in Jerusalem during the 4th year of the Great Revolt against the Romans was discovered during excavations by Israel Antiquities Authority, the IAA, together with the City of David and the Jewish Quarter Reconstruction and Development Company, and funded by the Shalem Project and the City of David Foundation. Hello, Katie. Hello, Will. Hello, Ryan. Hello, J. WhatsApp 55. Hello, Delandy142. Hello, Katie. Hello, FC Banader. Hello, Robbo Rocco Samp. Israel insists during talks with Syria, southern Syria must remain demilitarized. Israel is insisting in its negotiations with Syria that the south region of Syria remain demilitarized, according to a report heard on Wednesday on Can News. During a meeting last week between Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shahabi, Israel made it clear that this is the red line for them. The entire area between Sueda and Damascus must remain demilitarized, said an Israeli official familiar with the talks between the two countries. Speaking to Can News simultaneously, the United States emphasized the importance of maintaining the ceasefire agreements in the area, with all parties acting as guarantors. Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and Syrian President al-Shara agreed to ceasefire on July 19th and announced by US Special Envoy for Syria and Lebanon Tom Barak in a post on X account. Barak and the agreement was reached with US support and has the backing of Turkey, Jordan, neighbouring countries. The US envoy called Druze, Bedouins and Sunnis to lay down their arms and build together with other minorities a new and unified Syrian identity that would lead them to peace and prosperity with their neighbours. 2 days earlier, a local clash broke out in southern Syria between a Sunni Bedouin clan and a Druze community. Forces loyal to the al-Shara regime intervened and reportedly tried to separate the armed factions. Prime Minister Netanyahu released a video addressing Israel's airstrikes in Syria. We established a clear policy. The area south of Damascus from the Golan to the Druze Mountain region must remain demilitarized and the Druze must be protected, he said. Hi Caleb. Hi Liz Maxwell. Hi Jam Chinese. David Lang. Stephen Fleming, hello. Lemerton Yukal, 60,000 dead Palestinians, 1,850 of which are children. You're taking the numbers from Hamas. Lithium Clan, sorry, I totally disagree with your numbers. And so does the EU, so does anybody who's been counting the numbers. 60,000 was the number Hamas gave out, which I wouldn't trust Hamas if they were the last person on earth. Sophisticated 5,500-year-old flint blade workshop unearthed near Kiryat Gat in Israel. In a Sunday press release, the Israel Antiquities Authority announced the discovery of an ancient flint blade workshop near the city of Kiryat Gat. An advanced flint industry dating back approximately 5,500 years was uncovered at the site, and press release stated the most impressive findings discovered that the site are large flint cores which extremely sharp, uniformly shaped blades were produced. It said the blades themselves were used as knives for cutting and butchering, as harvesting tools like sickle blades. The ancient blade workshop was found with a large settlement believed to have been used for centuries. Hundreds of pits were discovered at the site which were used for storage, dwellings, production crafts, and cultic social rituals. Dr. Jacob Vardy, a prehistorian for Israel Antiquities Authority, explained that the archaeological evidence indicates a high level of technological sophistication for its time period. This is a sophisticated industry, he said, saying that the site served a centre from which Canaanite blades were distributed across broad regions in the Levant. So how many Palestinian children have to die for you to call it a victory? There is no victory in this war, because 12,000 Israelis were slaughtered by the Palestinians who came in through the border fence and killed men, women, and children, cutting heads off babies, raping women by cutting their breasts off, and doing terrible things. And Israel then couldn't stand by. Israel went into Gaza not to attack the Palestinian people, but to attack Hamas. And Hamas is the one that is withholding food from the Gazans. Hamas is the one that is shooting at the Gazans if they go to the food distribution sites. So Linda, whoever you are, no, I'm not Diddy, I'm sorry, you know my name. And yes, I would love to see free Palestine, for Palestine to be free from Hamas. Reprehensible, every evangelical should be disgusted by the New York Times accusing Israel of starving children in Gaza. Because why? None of it was true. If you read this, every evangelical Christian who values truth should be both sickened and angered by the conduct of the New York Times. On Friday, the New York Times published a front page story with this incredible headline: young, old, and sick starve to death in Gaza. There's nothing. To illustrate their accusations that Israel is purposefully starving the 2 million residents of the Gaza Strip, the New York Times ran a photo of several emaciated children being held in his mother's arms as she looks distraught, and he looks like he is on the verge of death. The story and the photo flashed around the globe to the New York Times 10 million subscribers and to hundreds of millions more on social media. The child's name was Mohammed Zakaria al-Muwa, being held by his mother. One lie after another, yet it wasn't true. Rather, the story was full of one lie after another. The boy Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutwaq in the photo is not starving to death. Rather, he suffers from a rare and terrible genetic disorder. That's heartbreaking, but it's not starvation. The rest of his family isn't starving. They're struggling as anyone in a hot war zone would, but they're not starving. Any junior reporter or photographer of the New York Times could have easily determined that because the story ran on Friday. Any serious news editor would have spiked the story after doing basic fact checking, but clearly the New York Times didn't care about reporting the truth. The story and the photo advanced their worldview that Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is cruel, that the Israeli army is heartless, and an emaciated 18-month-old child should become the poster child of Israel's purposeful campaign of starvation and genocide. Here is the facts. The truth is very different from what the New York Times portrayed. The policy of Israel government is not to starve the people of Gaza. To the contrary, Israel purposefully and actively facilitates the arrival and delivery of massive amounts of food and other humanitarian aid into Gaza. Since in the fall of 2003, Israel Defense Forces has made it possible for 94,000 truck loads of food to enter Gaza. That's enough to feed 2 million people for 2 years. Hundreds of trucks continue to enter. Just yesterday, more than 200 trucks and food and other aid entered Gaza. What's more, the IDF reported that 52 pallets of aid were airdropped into Gaza with cooperation from the United Arab Emirates and Jordan. Meanwhile, the American aid group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, run by Dr. Johnny Moore, a devout evangelical Christian, has delivered some 90 million meals to Gazans in the last 2 months. The New York Times finally admits its story and the photo are false and misleading. After 5 days of sending lies around the planet, the New York Times finally admitted its story was bogus. We recently ran a story about Gaza's most vulnerable civilians, including Mohammed Zakaria al-Mowak, who is about 18 months old and suffers from several severe malnutrition, noted a spokesperson for the New York Times on Tuesday. We since have learned new information, including the hospital that treated him, and his medical records have updated our story to provide context about his pre-existing health problems. The retraction is pretty weak. It is hardly a full-throated apology. It was issued 5 days after hundreds of millions of people read and saw the lies, and it was issued on the New York Times PR channel on X, which has only 89,000 followers. It was not issued on the New York Times main channel on X, which has 55 million followers. This is sickening and absolutely reprehensible, yet sadly not surprising. Indeed, it is yet another classic and cruel example of the very kind of fake news that continues to drive people's trust in the so-called mainstream media even lower. This is exactly why my colleagues and I launched All Israel News on September 1st, 2020. We were so sick of the avalanche of lies and extreme bias against Israel and against the Jews and Christians in so much of the media, so we decided to do something about it, and it's good for them that are. God bless and protect you, sir. Let the truth come down like rain. Thank you, Polly. Netanyahu is the devil incarnate, and you would be the judge of that, wouldn't you, Bobby Fudge? May God deal with the New York Times. Yes, thank you, Polly. And hello, Leif. Thank you for joining us as well. More news from Israel. Israel researcher claims finding this is from Moses written in ancient Egyptian mine. Israel researchers claim finding this is from Moses, written in ancient Egyptian mine. Michael Baron, a graduate student at Ariel University in Israel, has submitted a paper for peer review arguing that Proto-Sinaitic writing is an ancient Egyptian turquoise in an ancient Egyptian turquoise mine. Reads the words, "This is from Moses." A former rabbi, Barry Ron, argues the inscription is evidence of the biblical narrative about Moses and the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. This interpretation, he posits, is backed up by other inscriptions which he suggests may reflect Israelite theology. We find worshipful inscriptions lauding the idol Baalat, which clearly an El or God-serving scribe coming in later and cancelling out certain letters in an effort to turn the message into a God-serving one. Baron said in an interview with Tim Mahoney on Patterns of Evidence film series, according to his bio, Baron's new critical translations of nearly the entire Proto-Sinaitic corpus suggest that these inscriptions may preserve historical traces of the biblical traditions of the Hebrew sojourners, slavery and exodus from Egypt. Baron maintains that his claims of finding the name Moses among the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions is not intended to be a sensationalist. I took a very critical view towards the finding that name Moses or anything that could sound sensational, he said. In fact, the only way to do serious work is to try not to find element that seems biblical, but to struggle to find alternative solutions that are at least as likely. Baron also admitted it is possible that his work will not hold up to peer review, even if my finds doesn't exactly stand the test of time and peer review. That would cause me to cease believing in God or worshipping him according to my own tradition, he said. Widely expected Egyptologist Dr. Thomas Schneider has already weighed on Baron's claims, saying they are completely unproven and misleading. Proto-Sinaitic tracing back to the Middle Bronze Age is notoriously difficult to translate due to the scarcity of the known text in the language. The scarcity of the known text in the language. Every proposed translation relies on a corpus of fewer than 40 texts, many badly weathered, from the Jerusalem Post. Can you say, Junior Kelly? Okay, bye. Australians believe 28% of their fellow citizens view Jews negatively. A new poll released Tuesday found that Australians estimate 28% of their fellow citizens hold negative views towards Israel. Conducted by the Combat Anti-Semitism movement CAM, the poll asked 1,000 Australians various questions about Australians' attitudes towards the Jews. Rather than asking for their personal views, responders were asked what they believed public opinion about the Jews was in Australia. The respondents on average indicated that they believe 8% of Australians have very negative attitudes towards Jews and 20% hold slightly negative views. They believe 9% of Australians have a very positive attitude towards the Jews and 15% have a slightly positive view, according to the results. About half of those surveyed, however, indicated that government officials should do more to combat such discrimination. Nearly half, 49% of respondents, said that they expected elected officials, particularly local leaders, to firmly oppose religious and ethnic intolerance. Australian government leaders have already taken action in the attempt to reduce anti-Semitism in Australia. Earlier this month, Australia's Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism, Gillian Siegel, released a report proposing ways to oppose anti-Semitism at a federal level. One recommended was to block funding to universities and the other public institutions that failed to adequately oppose anti-Semitism. Siegel also recommended deportation of non-citizens engaged in anti-Semitic conduct. This is something that the governments of this world needs to work with civil society on all levels. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said after the report was released. Hello Mutamasma, hello Christina, hello Freddie K, YK, sorry, Ally Top, hello, Jams 8008, nice to see you as well. No matter the pressure, Israel cannot and will not renounce its God-given historical rights to the land from the sea, from the Jordan Sea to the sea. Man proposes, God disposes, as the saying goes. The mounting pressure on Israel to accept a two-state solution reflects this enduring historical tension between human plans and God's purposes. Up to today, more than 70% of the United Nations member states have recognized Palestine as a sovereign state alongside Israel. This growing global consensus, however, is not forming in a vacuum. The world is rightly shaken by the horrifying images of suffering in Gaza. The grief is real, the loss is devastating. Innocent civilians, many of them children, have paid the price for Hamas's ruthless decisions. Every lost life, whether Israeli or Palestinian, is a human tragedy, and the suffering of the Gaza population should stir compassion, not cynicism. Yet tragically, this plays directly into Hamas's cruel strategy to deepen the humanitarian crisis as much as possible and manipulate public opinion through fake news, half-truths and staged images. And the strategy works. The modern digital consumer, overwhelmed by fragmented content and lacking historical or biblical clarity, reacts emotionally, forming strong but superficial opinions. As emotions run high, the facts get blurred. More Western leaders are now considering recognizing Palestine, believing it is a step towards peace. But this may only reinforce the very crisis they seek to end. There is a growing consensus, even within Israel, that the status quo cannot last. Change is inevitable, but what kind of change can truly bless them both people? Only God's redemptive plan can offer such lasting peace, one that allows Jews and Arabs to flourish without dividing the land entrusted to Israel. Supporters of the two-state solution may act with sincere intentions, but sincerity alone is no substitute for divine wisdom. That's why we must seek not to just political solutions, but alignment with God's revealed purposes. Because Israel is not merely a modern state, it is the vessel of a much older story, a chosen people to carry God's covenant through history. Chosen people, all with all living beings, so too with nations and cultures. They are both, and sooner or later they vanish. But God, in his sovereign will, choose Israel, not to disappear like the rest, but to live through the storms of history, to remember what happened, and to bear witness to God's eternal law and redemptive plan. Over the course of more than 3 millennia, mankind has devised countless plans to annihilate the Jewish people, from Haman in ancient ancient Persia, to the Roman expulsions from the Inquisitions and the pogroms, to Hitler and the Nazis. Again and again, the end of the Jewish nation was plotted, yet God had a different plan. If you don't know where you came from, you won't know where you're going, says another proverb. The chosen people remember, and as with individuals who gain wisdom through life experience, so too with nations. The more they've endured, the wiser they can become. Israel has survived more attempts at destruction than any other people because it has always survived, and so in God's provision, Israel possesses more accumulated life experience than any other nation, preserved in a body of writing spanning millennia and studied daily by many with discipline and reverence. This thousands of years of experience is a form of advantage. For some, it breeds resentment, the ancient heritage of Israel alongside its miraculous survival is a stumbling block to those who do not believe in the God of the Bible. It becomes fuel for their satanic fire of anti-Semitism. Yet for a believer, Israel's survival through the centuries is not just an accident of history, it is the unfolding of a divine strategy, God's plan. In contrast to human plans, God's ways may unfold differently, as we rightly say. Man proposes, God disposes. One might also say God plans and man carries it out. Throughout history, whatever God determined to move his redemptive plan forward, he appointed a leader flawed like all men, yet chosen to guide his people according this plan. These leaders from Moses up to Theodore Herzl and Ben Gurion, none of them were perfect. Their leadership was marked by mistakes, and both they and their people paid the price, sometimes dearly in their personal lives and also on a national level. So it's true today. It's true today. Israel's leadership is not flawless, and the consequences of the past and present errors are real and painful. The events of October 7th and the ongoing war since can be interpreted as divine judgment on both peoples, though not equal in measure, of course. However, God's redemptive plan moves forward nonetheless, unstoppable, often in spite of limited human understanding and failure. He alone guarantees its fulfillment. He remembers his covenant, the word that he commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant that he made with Abram, and his oath that he swore to Isaac and confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying that to you I will give the land of Canaan as an allotment for your inheritance. Psalm 105, 8-11. The eastern borders of the promised land. Israel remembers not only the divine covenant recorded in the Bible, a covenant that granted it the land of Canaan, but also the historical events they went through living in the land. That memory is preserved in Israel's liturgy, prayers, and the continuous historical consciousness. The Jewish people also know well that the eastern border of Canaan, their God-given inheritance, is the Jordan River. The Jordan is mentioned nearly 33 times in the Bible as the eastern border of the land promised to Isaac and Jacob. For those who acted against the Jewish people and do not believe the Bible is the Word of God, this means nothing. The attributes Israel's survival through 2,000 years of exile and its return to its ancestral homeland merely to Jewish stubbornness, a refusal to disappear from the stage of history. They considered the alignment of Israel modern re-establishment with biblical prophecy to be nothing more than coincidence, And of course, they do not believe a God that says to Israel, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. Genesis 12:3. But this is the truth. But this truth has never failed, nor will it. Judea and Samaria for peace. At first glance, the idea of the two states for two nations may indeed seem tempting, a promising ideal solution to a painful and long-standing conflict. Strong arguments have long been in favour. Before October 7th, Israel's society itself was almost evenly divided on the question among modern Israeli leaders. Some firmly believed that this was the price of peace. Three prime ministers, Yitzhak Rabin, Ariel Sharon, and Helmut Olmert, sincerely believed and fought to implement a peace based on this human calculation. Their efforts often began with hope and broad international support, yet the plans never came to fruition. A political assassination, mysterious health collapse, a surprise intifada of October 7th. Something always intervenes, but perhaps it's not a chance that intervenes, but the unseen hand of God. So let the nations beware. The God of Israel does not forget his promises, and Israel cannot forget them either. God won't let it happen. Even if every encounter in the world were to recognize, even if, every country in the world were to recognize Palestinian statehood, one thing remains certain, that after 2005 unilateral Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, followed by a Hamas takeover, and especially after October 7th, there is no longer any public trust in Israel in the two-state solution. Attempts may be made to force the Jewish state into relinquishing its fundamental security interests, but one has reason to believe they will fail, especially when trusting that God has a better plan. For the Lord of hosts has proposed, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back? Isaiah 14:27. In all Israel's faith-based reporting, important to you, be part of it, help us control. Okay. Ivy, hello, Ivy, thank you for blessing me. L9, thank you for watching. Mary, thank you for watching too. Click Perna Coach, thank you for watching. The next part of the news. Dates to remember concerning God's timing and Israel. Times and seasons have a way of stirring the memories, both personal and collective. Depending on what they might signify, the reactions and implications may vary among individuals or nations, or among those joined together through religion or faith. Below are some historical markers that are the beginning to converge to draw attention to a watershed. Perhaps both friend and foe are taking notice. October 31st, 1917, Reformation Day, which gave the Bible back to the people that they may be saved by faith alone in God and his word. 1517, Turkish Ottoman Muslim Empire begins rule in the Holy Land. and the land of God of the Bible. 1882 to 1903, the first Aliyah immigration following the pogrom riots in Russia in 1881 and 1882. August 29th, 1879, the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, led by Theodor Herzl, who prophetically understood the times that the Jewish people needed to seek a publicly recognized, legal, secured homeland. June 28, 1914, the assassination of the Austrian Archduke in Serbia, the catalyst for the declaration a month later of what became World War I, ending on November 11, 1918, for a nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. October 31st, 1917, Anklas Lighthouse, Beersheba charged victory over the Ottomans in breakthrough victory towards return of the Jewish people back to the land of Israel and of ending 400 years of Ottoman rule in the Holy Land and 400 years to the day of the Reformation. British War Cabinet approves the Balfour Declaration. November 2nd, 1917. Balfour Declaration of intent of the British to establish a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. It shall come to pass in that day that Yahweh God shall set his hand against for a second time to recover the remnant of people who are left. He will set up a banner for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. December 11th, 1917, Jerusalem surrendered to the British General Admiral Edmund Allenby and the Allies from Turkish Ottoman control. April 25th, 1920, the San Remo Resolution, ratified by the post-World War II powers legally, sanctioned the establishment of the Jewish people back to the land of their fathers. August 12th, 1922, the League of Nations established a British mandate in Palestine authorised to carry out the San Remo Resolution, legally sanctioned the intent of the Balfour Declaration. September 1st, 1939 to September 2nd, 1945, World War II. November 29th, 1947, the UN Partition Plan for Palestine, offering both Jewish people and Arabs, Palestinian states, level. Israel accepted what for then constituted a publicly recognized legal secure homeland. The Arabs rejected and prepared for war. Israel's Independence War, 1948-49, 430 years since the restored promise of salvation and righteousness by faith in Yahweh God and His Word and the Ottoman Islamic control of the land of Israel. May 4th, 1948, the State of Israel was established in her homeland as a homeland for the Jewish people, proclaimed by Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion in accord with the legal status conferred by both the League of Nations and the United Nations in the British mandate ended the day before. June 7th, 1967, capture of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War, underlying the city, unifying the city and Israel Jewish in Jewish hands 70 years after the First Zionist Congress 50-year jubilee since the Balfour Declaration. In December 9th, 1987, the first Intifada Arab uprising begins, lasting 7 years, leading to the Oslo Accords between Israel and the PLO. It was signed on September 13th, 1993. September 29th, 2000, the second Intifada begins, exclusively ending in a truce on February 8th, 2005, and leading to the Gaza disengagement on September 12th, 2005. 2014, 100 years since World War I. 2015, since end of World War II. 2017, 500 years since the Reformation, 120 years since the first Zionist Congress, 100 double jubilees since the Beersheba Charge, the Balfour Declaration, and the capture of Jerusalem by the Gentile Christians, 70 years since the UN Partition Plan, 50-year jubilee since capture of Jerusalem by Israel, Jews 30 years since beginning of the first Palestinian Intifada, breaking the yoke, horse staking of the rag, 2018, 100 years from World War I, 70 years from Israel's independence nation state. October 7th, 2003, Shabbat, and the last day of the Sukkot Feast of the Tabernacles, 50 years from the beginning of the Yom Kippur War in 1973, a realization that never again can possibly happen again, and in Israel, 2018, 80 years since the re-establishment as home for the Jewish people. 2030, 2,000 years, 2 days since the death and the resurrection of the Messiah, Yeshua, who's Jesus, and of the new covenant promise of the Holy Land, fulfilling any and all believe in the Lord Yeshua and the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And 20, with 2 question marks, the glorious appearing of our great Lord and Saviour, Messiah Yeshua. Hello, Ollie. Thank you for coming on. Hello, Jamie Mans. Thank you for coming on too. Hello, Chloe Janet. It's nice to see you on, Chloe. How are you, Pat? I can't wait to hear back in with us. This seemed to have kept you out, but it'd be good to see you again. So, can't wait to see you again. And that is the end of the Israel news for today. Come back again for another video. But don't forget that you can look me up at my website, which is www.garethcahoon.co.uk, or you can fund my ministry by going to PayPal, garethcahoon3@gmail.com. And remember that we serve an awesome Saviour who died for each one of us, rose from the grave, and is sitting today at the right hand of his Father, praying on our behalf. He loves us, he loved us from the very beginning, and he is the answer to all our prayers. Shalom, Maranatha, and hallelujah.